Let me see the bottom of your boots.
I didn't do it.
But you were there.
I wasn't there.
This is what Charles looks like today.
That's what their composition does.
In this case, we will travel to Pensacola, Florida, the morning of May 23, 2019. As a lady was walking her dog, she would come across a body wrapped in a tarp tossed on the side of the road. Officers were dispatched to the scene to investigate. When they arrived, they too could smell the strong scent of decomposition, indicating that there might be a body inside. As the officers examined the area, they found a broken piece of sheetrock nearby, and it appeared to have a tire impression and a shoe print on it. Following this lead, they discovered a tarp lying in a ditch close to the roadside. Curiosity getting the best of them, the officers approached the tarp and opened it up. To their horror, they found the lifeless body of a white male. The investigators would later find out that the victim had been tied up with duct tape on his mouth, ankles, and hands. The body was identified as belonging to a 54-year-old man named Charles Locke. Furthermore, they were able to find fingerprints from the victim, which allowed them to confirm his identity. The discovery of Charles Locke's body would lead to an investigation that would shake the neighborhood and leave many wondering who could have committed such a heinous crime. Charles Locke, the youngest of his family, was well known and well liked by his neighbors. Growing up, Charles had been particularly close to his sister, and as they both grew older, they remained a tight-knit pair. However, Charles had faced some significant challenges in his life. After 17 years of marriage, he and his wife had gotten a divorce, and he had also suffered a debilitating stroke that left him with physical limitations. Despite these setbacks, Charles continued to try and have a normal life, and he was often seen spending time in his front yard or chatting with neighbors. Investigators would discover that Charles lived in a house 3 miles away from where his body was found. Upon arriving at Charles's home, investigators attempted to make contact with anyone who might have been inside. While searching the area, they stumbled upon a neighbor's trash near Charles's front yard. Inside the can, they found broken pieces of sheetrock and orange ties, the same kind found at the crime scene. When they tried to contact the homeowner, a 44-year-old man named Calvin Allison, they were unable to get a hold of him. Eventually, they were able to speak with Calvin, who agreed to talk with them about what he knew.
You want coffee? I made some coffee.
No, I don't like.
You got me some Marriott boots?
Yes, sir. He said, nah, $300, man. I can't believe they're gonna let us get this thing. He goes, hey, you gotta pay for them.
And Calvin, where do you work at?
ECUA,
What do you do there?
regional services, sewers, water.
I feel you. I gotta convince myself.
I'm on 3 to 11 tonight and tomorrow. That's my last night of 3 to 11. Then I get to go back to days.
Upon speaking with Calvin, investigators noted that his body language was non-confrontational and he appeared relaxed and calm during the interview. They questioned him about his daily routine and personal life, hoping to glean some information that might be relevant to the investigation. After about 50 minutes of conversation, the investigators broached the subject of Charles Locke. Calvin told them that he and Charles were friends but not particularly close. They would greet each other in passing, and occasionally, Calvin and his wife would bring Charles food as a friendly gesture. The last time Calvin had seen Charles was on Sunday, shortly before the tragedy occurred.
But then we didn't really start talking to him until his wife left him. And he came over, and my wife's
I'm sorry. When did his wife leave, by the way?
year and a half ago. Once a week, we would take him a plate if we cooked out,
Mhm.
but he would come over sometimes to sit down. He came over for Thanksgiving and Christmas dinner
When was the last time you had seen Charles?
Sunday night. When I took him to plate him a pork chop dinner, we cooked on the grill.
While some investigators were speaking with Calvin, others conducted a search of Charles's home. Inside, they discovered a pool of blood in the living room, as well as blood stains and drag marks in the kitchen and hallway. The discovery left the investigators with more questions than answers, and they continued to piece together the events that led to Charles's untimely death. As the investigation into Charles Locke's death continued, investigators also obtained a search warrant for Calvin House. While some members of the team interviewed Calvin, others searched his home for any potential evidence that might be relevant to the case. As they went through Calvin's house, the investigators relayed any information they found to the team conducting the interview. They searched through his personal belongings and inspected any areas that might contain potential evidence related to Charles's death. At one point, as the detectives were talking to Calvin, one of their phones rang. The interruption seemed to have caught Calvin's attention.
A man's body found wrapped in a tarp in Escambia County last night.
This is a story we've been following all day. Hannah McKenzie is there at the scene with the latest.
As the detectives continued to question Calvin, they were also receiving up-to-date information from the officers conducting the search. They were informed of any new discoveries, evidence, or leads that might shed some light on the events leading up to Charles's death. The investigators were meticulously combing through the evidence, hoping to piece together the events that had transpired. They were leaving no stone unturned, gathering as much information as possible to build a strong case against Calvin or potentially uncover a different perpetrator altogether. After stalling for an hour, investigators ramped up the questions to build a timeline for Charles' murder.
Drop the daughter off at 8 o'clock in the morning.
Well, we would leave the house at 6:30,
Okay.
drop my son off at 7 at school.
Sunday night.
Yes, sir.
And you said you remember earlier telling me that you were out barbecuing and you guys cooked out and you brought a plate over. And how long were you there for?
10 minutes. 5 minutes.
Did your wife go with you or just you?
Just me.
Okay.
Wife was next door.
Yeah, I noticed that you had already started purchasing some sheetrock and stuff like that. You know, the boards. Have you got any of those put up yet, or is that just something that's been sitting there?
Stuff in the garbage can, that's yours.
Yes.
That's by the road.
Yeah, I've been there for 2 months.
All right.
You did a search warrant with residences. Okay. This is why we have some items of Charles inside your residence.
Okay.
Your reason why?
His spare keys he gave us,
Is that why did he give you any spare keys?
in case he lost the other ones.
Okay.
When he lost his wallet, I have his checkbook. He used his checks. He gave me that in case he lost his wallet again.
Your felony?
No, sir.
No criminal history?
I have
Battery charge?
Yeah.
As investigators questioned Calvin about the death of his neighbor, Charles, they noticed a shift in his demeanor. While he spoke at length about his family, his responses regarding Charles were short and evasive. This behavior immediately raised suspicions, and the investigators noted it as a red flag. Concerned that Calvin may be hiding something, the investigators increased the pressure and began questioning him specifically about the broken sheetrock that had been discovered at his house. They wanted to know why the pieces of sheetrock found in his trash can match those found at the crime scene. As the investigators applied more pressure, Calvin's demeanor continued to shift. His responses became even shorter and more evasive, further fueling the investigators' suspicion that he may be involved in Charles's death.
The body was found behind me here in this wooded area, and investigators tell me the actual crime scene is only about 3 miles away from here.
I know something else happened, okay? What I need is help assisting with what happened to Charles.
Kelvin, I want you to make one thing very clear to you, all right? We don't pull no punches. We don't pull rock. That is at the scene, okay? The same UPC code is on your front porch, Chief. They've explained it away. You tell me, all right, you don't say you didn't do anything. You explain to me, how did Calvin Allison's boot print get there at the scene?
During the interview, investigators also learned that the tire marks on the sheetrock near Charles's body matched the tires on Calvin's truck.
Your left front tire's cupped. Okay, you know what that is, right? Cupped. All right, it's when you ran over the sheetrock, you left the black tire marks on there that matches your tire.
Dave, but I didn't do it.
You were there.
I wasn't there. I've been at work and with.
Charles has a little fetish that a lot of people don't know about. I think Charles, come on to you.
Go out with your children thinking that you're a monster, or you want to go out to say that we owned up and you want to tell us what happened over there?
Well, I didn't do anything. I didn't do it.
What we want to know is what happened. We need a story, Calvin.
Did somebody borrow your boots?
I don't know what to tell you.
You just killed people.
I don't kill people. I didn't do it.
Right there, there's your boot print. Right there. Let me see the bottom of your boots. Yeah, that's your boot print right there.
This is what Charles looks like today.
That's what the composition does.
We don't have the story. I need your side.
Well, I didn't do it. So, I didn't do anything to Charles.
The investigators observed that Calvin remained composed during their conversations and did not display any signs of anger. However, they noted that he appeared nervous, as evidenced by his occasional voice cracking while discussing Charles. Despite his calm demeanor, Calvin consistently denied any involvement in the incident. The investigators attempted to elicit a response from Calvin by presenting a hypothetical scenario that could have occurred, but their efforts were unsuccessful. During their conversation with Calvin, the investigators were informed of the results of the medical examination performed on Charles. It was revealed that the cause of his death was a combination of blunt force trauma and asphyxiation. The examination revealed that the blunt force trauma alone would not have been enough to cause Charles's death. It was the duct tape covering his mouth that led to his suffocation. Investigators noticed Calvin's tone getting lower the more they questioned him about Charles. Finally, after several minutes of being confronted with evidence, Calvin opened up about what happened that fatal night.
It was an accident. I think maybe that when it happened, you got nervous. This has never happened to you before, Calvin. Otherwise, we're in a bad situation, buddy. I ain't here to piss you off or anything, man. I need to know what happened over there.
He tried to kiss me, grab me, and pushed him down. I think he hit his head on it. I don't know what it was. Blood was coming out. No, it's not okay.
I ain't your side before the side of the story, so he tried to kiss you. So it came on to you.
I didn't know what to do.
Just got nervous.
Embarrassed.
Did you tell your wife?
She doesn't know. Dude's gonna kill me.
Even though Calvin has confessed to the murder of Charles Locke, investigators still need to establish a timeline for the event, including when Calvin dumped Charles's body.
Did you bring Charles over to that area?
Last night.
Charles was bound. You know what I mean? There was tape around his mouth, behind his back, and his legs were bound. Was Charles still alive when you came over?
I couldn't get him to roll up. I had to use that to roll him up.
Why were in the mouth?
I don't know.
Did you check if Charles was breathing at all?
He wasn't breathing. He was already swelled up.
Upon hearing Calvin's account of the events, the investigators initially thought that his decision to bind Charles's legs and wrist was an attempt to make him more compact for transportation. However, they found it difficult to reconcile this with the fact that Calvin had also placed duct tape over Charles's mouth. The medical examiner's report only added to their confusion. According to the report, Charles wasn't dead before the duct tape was applied. It became apparent to the investigators that this was not a spontaneous accident, and Calvin was responsible for Charles's death. The evidence painted a clear picture of Calvin's intentions, and it was evident that Charles died as a result of Calvin's actions.
Suspect in this case is Locke's next-door neighbor, 44-year-old Calvin Dwayne Allison. Investigators say evidence found in Allison's garbage can and on his front porch links him to the crime.
I'm Calvin.
I did something bad. The food, when I set it down in the kitchen, he made a pass at me and I pushed him and he fell.
What? Why would you not say something? Like, why would it was an accident, Calvin? So what are you being charged with right now?
I don't know.
Oh my God, Calvin.
Calvin was placed under arrest and charged with second-degree murder. The trial took place 5 months after the crime, and Calvin pleaded not guilty, claiming self-defense. It was discovered by investigators that days following the murder, Calvin had begun withdrawing money from Charles's bank account. After 2 days, Calvin was found guilty of second-degree murder, grand theft, and tampering with evidence. As a result of his actions that night, Calvin was sentenced to life without parole.